What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. Over the past week, I've been streaming basically non-stop on Twitch with the goal of completing a big challenge in the Pokemon series, the National Dex, but I decided to add another extra challenge in that I wanted to create a living Dex, which essentially is having every individual Pokemon in the game. Rather than catching a Bulbasaur and evolving it to Ivysaur and then Venusaur for the Pokedex entries, I went and caught each of the three as well as every other Pokemon in the entire Dex. I made this video because there were a ton of people who really wanted an update for the Living Dex video I made for Sword and Shield. However, this time, rather than just doing a boring explanation of what you have to do, I figured I'd just document the past week and show you what I did to complete the entire Pokedex. Today we're going to find out how easy you can complete a Living National Dex in Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now, since I've been asked this about 1,000 times over the past week, if you just want a guide for this video, you can find it in the description. I also still get like 50 requests a day of people asking to edit the old one, so if you just go to File and then make a copy, you can have your own copy and edit the checkboxes to keep up with your total. As always, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Roughly only 40% of the people that watch are actually subscribed, and if you're watching this the day it goes out, I'm also taking on the Battle Tower, so you can watch me embarrass myself doing that for another video. With all that out of the way, let's just get right into it. So on the first day of this challenge, I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to complete the Dex as I slowly made my way collecting every badge, or just rush like a madman and beat the game as fast as possible. I ended up going with the latter and rushed through the game to complete the main story because I've played through the Sinnoh story easily 30 times by this point, and that ended up being the best choice I could have made. There are a few reasons why that I'll get into later in the video, but if you're trying to finish the Dex as fast as possible, you'll want to beat the game as soon as you can if you don't plan on trading a bunch. Speaking of that, to ensure the most authentic catch-em-all experience, I made the choice to catch everything I could in this one copy of Shining Pearl, no matter how much more difficult or inconvenient it would be in the other game. With that in mind, I still have to do trade evolutions and version exclusives, but for the most part, the plan was to grab literally everything on this singular copy. So for the first day, I basically just recreated the speedrun setup that I made for the catch-em-all, where I get Mew and destroy everything in my path, which to no surprise worked without really any issues. Because you have also probably seen the Sinnoh story at least 30 times this week, I'm not going to really cover much of it, especially considering that I caught a whopping 13 Pokemon throughout the entire main story, and most of them were from the first few routes. As I was going through the story, I made sure to take on the Drifloon battle in Fantina's gym, as that's the only place in the game where you can fight a Drifloon before Friday, but generally I played the game as normal as you'd expect. Now, although I did have an absurdly small list of Pokemon, I did grab some really important ones like Jirachi and Mew at the beginning of the game, the Happiny egg you get when you leave Hearthome, and obviously Palkia at Spear Pillar, but aside from that, there were only a few generic Pokemon. I also did make sure to slather every honey tree I walked by, but I did forget nearly all of them once I got to Hearthome City. During my playthrough, I tried to evolve everything I could to pad the total a little bit, but after a while I stuck with the standard starter, legendary, Luxray, Staraptor, and Kricketune with the Master Ball, as most people do. After decimating the entirety of the Sinnoh region, I finished the game in 8 hours and 32 minutes, which is pretty decent, but considering the world record in the moment is under 20 minutes, I think I have a little bit of work to do. Now the least important part of the game is out of the way, let's focus on catching some Pokemon. So like I did with the Catch 'em All video, I really tried to do all the battles in the story that had Pokemon that were a little too difficult to get so I could grab the National Dex faster, but because I also tried to speedrun the whole story, I repelled past a bunch of really common encounters like Tentacool and Graveler, but realistically going through the whole game with only missing 18 Pokemon is pretty solid and doesn't take too long to finish. I didn't really bother with catching any of the ones that are exclusive to fishing because I was more concerned with opening up the map as much as possible, but one thing I did invest a lot of time into were the honey trees. So if you're unaware, the honey trees are scattered all throughout the Sinnoh region, and if you slather one with honey and come back later, there's a chance that a Pokemon will be there. Unlike the original games, these Pokemon aren't really rare anymore, and the only two Pokemon that are of any actual worth are Burmy and Heracross, because you can't find them anywhere else, and Munchlax just to say that you found one in a tree. I did manage to get a few rare ones like Cherubi and Aipom, but literally every other Pokemon except for Burmy and Heracross can be found in the Grand Underground. I made sure to reslather every tree after I interacted with them to ensure that I could do the encounters at the beginning of stream, and considering it takes a minimum of 6 hours for the Pokemon to appear, if I streamed enough in one day, I could potentially see up to 42 honey tree Pokemon a day. Not too bad odds to find a Heracross, right? At this point in the stream, I've been live for nearly 10 hours, so I decided to call it a day and come back tomorrow with the plan of really starting to make a dent in the total. By the end of the stream, my Pokedex was at a measly 17 Pokemon, but I knew tomorrow was going to be a whole different story. To start the second day, I knew that the first small hurdle that had to be taken care of was finishing the Sinnoh Dex. Before I started clearing through that though, I first had to address what I like to call my daily events. These are essentially the little things that you should take care of at the beginning of every day you start playing the game, as they are limited time-wise and can change or disappear if you don't take care of them in time. I made it a routine to do all these things at the start to ensure that I never forget to do them by the end of stream. The most obvious one are the honey trees. While I was checking the first one, I found Drifloon sitting outside Valley Windworks, which also happens to be a daily Pokemon. Because I started my game on Thursday, I was able to actually get one on Friday morning. This is also pretty surprising because in the originals you had to wait an entire week instead of just a day, so I was anticipating that it was going to be one of the last Pokemon in the entire dex. After grabbing that, I remembered that I could also redeem the Manaphy Egg, which isn't required for completing the National Dex, but since it's currently an event, it definitely needs to be added to the Living Dex before it's gone for good. At this point I was ready to tackle the honey trees, but one of my viewers pointed out that you can now track the honey trees on the map, which helps you know which ones you've slathered as well as when they're done, which is an insane game changer since you can check this anywhere in the game. After checking all the trees, I ended up finding Burmy, which was nice, but Heracross once again was nowhere to be seen. It's not really much of an issue since I have plenty of time before I'm even close to being done with the dex. With all the daily events taken care of, it's time to finish the Scene Dex for Sinnoh. I skipped a few encounters like Riolu, but as you assume, I still had to grab all the big encounters like the Lake Spirits. Because I could prepare a good team later for the second roaming Pokemon, I just decided to use my Master Ball and Mesprit, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all too much which one you use it on. With that done, I was able to talk to Professor Rowan and unlock the National Dex and get the Poke Radar. And this is the point where you can really do whatever you want. Because there are an abundance of easy Pokemon to get, I figured the best play would be get all the really difficult Pokemon out of the way first so I don't have to worry about them later. I let my chat vote on what I should do first, and the majority decided that the first location I should go to is Turnback Cave. Out of all the post-game events, this one takes the least amount of time, but that didn't stop me from getting into the Giratina room and immediately leaving thinking I went back to the entrance. After catching Giratina, we can write off this location for the rest of the game, but we'll need to come back to Sendoff Spring to grab a few more important Pokemon. I decided to go underground with the intention of catching whatever I could find, but my chat convinced me to try to get Spiritomb, which is easily one of the most annoying Pokemon in the entire game. Okay, so let me break this down for you. Let me show you how to do it. Do you see on here, like this whole area right here, that's in between all of these locations? In each one of these areas, almost all of them, is one NPC that you have to find. So you may be thinking, oh, that's kind of easy because you can just go to each section. You do have to go through the entire map and get them, which is a little bit of a pain. But realistically, if you just went to each little location, like right here is another location, you should be able to find it, right? No. So in each of these locations, there can be 2 to 3 NPCs. On the upside, it is guaranteed, but you don't know which one is in which location, which is really annoying. However, your boy is a little bit of a gamer and has already got them all, so I know the list, so I know where they are. So with all this in mind, I made my way through the locations and talked to every NPC I could find. At the time, I figured there were only 32 people you could talk to in the Grand Underground, but I managed to find 3 people I'd never met before, which was a huge relief in case I ever want to go for this again. The last person I met ended up being a new person, and I ended up finding all the people in under an hour, and I didn't even need to go to the bottom right section of the map. I like to think there are at least 40 NPCs because of that reason, but if you're going for this, just know there's a decent amount of wiggle room when it comes to finding enough NPCs. With this, I was able to grab Spiritomb and check it off the list, but I wasn't quite done with the underground for the day. Since I was now in the post-game, I was able to mine mysterious shards for the legendaries in Ramanas Park. I figured it'd be a good idea for the time being to tackle the Reggies, and then worry about the others in that area later on. Now, if you watched this when I streamed it, this is a small plug for you to follow me on Twitch, you should know that my luck for finding these was absolutely insane. Not only was I finding a lot of the large shards that equal one legendary encounter in the Ramanas Park, I was finding multiple shards at the same time. It took me literally 15 minutes to gather all the shards, which is absurdly fast if you ever tried to go for them. During this quick hunt, I also grabbed a few fossils, as well as some evolution stones, but there are many more opportunities to come back and farm for those. At Ramanas Park, I was able to exchange those shards for the discovery slates. With this, I was able to catch Registeel, Regice, and Regirock. I'm pretty sure it took longer to catch Regice than it did to collect everything to get here. With all 3 of them collected, I made my way to Snow Point Temple to catch Regigigas, which finishes off basically every legendary encounter on the main island. From here, I made my way to the fight area to take on the actual post-game storyline. This entire island is filled with a bunch of special items for evolutions and special encounters, so I made sure to grab the really important things like the Super Rod and the Dubious Disc that will come into play a bit later. After moving through the routes, I made it to Stark Mountain and completed the long-winded events with Buck to unlock the Heatran battle, which basically completes the entire story for the game. I would talk more about this section, but if you saw the last video I uploaded, you know how I feel about this specific mission. With basically everything story-related finished, I now had a total of 50 Pokemon in the dex, with about 30 to 40 in the living dex. Nothing really to brag about, but considering that I had to run through a bunch of big events for the story, the rest of this challenge can be focused on catching everything in sight. I made sure to check out the other routes and grab all the special items before heading back to the underground to start making a dent. Because it was already pretty late into stream, I figured I was trying to get the Sinnoh starters as I was thinking of going in Pokedex orders, so I managed to get a few things like Turtwig and even previous gens like Squirtle. After finishing off the stream with some high adrenaline contests, I made my rounds on the honey trees only to catch a few more Burmy. Not the worst considering I need multiple of them, but this leaves Heracross as the only Pokemon left to be found. Because I unlocked the National Dex on this day, I was able to start the swarm encounters with Dawn's sister in Sand Gem Town. Through this, each day a random Pokemon is set to appear in specific routes in the region, and although many of them can be found underground, there are some special ones that can only be obtained through this, like Slackoth and Nosepass. Thankfully, unlike the originals, you don't have to check with her every day, and you can just open your menu to see which Pokemon is available for the day. The first one ended up being Surskit, which unfortunately is also obtainable underground, but since I didn't have it yet, I just caught one anyways. With this done, I ended the day with 53 Pokemon in the Dex, which once again isn't very good, but with all the big legendary events done, all of the attention can be put towards working towards the living Dex. Day 3 began with going underground and catching a few more Pokemon and farming shards for the rest of the legendaries at Ramanas Park. The night before, I decided that the best play would be to take on catching everything in the Sinnoh Dex before taking on the entirety of the National Dex. Although my eyes were set on the first 150, if I came across something that was pretty rare, I'd still grab it to save time later on when I actually need it. Partway through, I realized that I didn't even bother with the daily events for the day, so I ran around interacting with the honey trees and once again only ended up catching Burmy with no signs of a Heracross. I also realized that I completely missed out on another daily event yesterday, so I went to Route 212 North to check out the Pokemon Mansion. In the right wing, you can talk to the owner of the lot, and every day a random cute Pokemon will be available in the back lot. Just like the swarms, there are quite a lot of Pokemon that you can catch everywhere else, but there are big ones like Porygon that you can only obtain in this location. This time around I found Jigglypuff, so we'll check in tomorrow and see if we'll find something good. Another new event that I was able to check out was the Great Marsh. Now, although this was available for the first 2 days, the day after you get the National Dex, you're able to see a new expanded list of encounters, and of course quite a few of them are exclusive to the area. These are called the daily Pokemon, and a common misconception is that there's only one available at the marsh each day. However, you have quite a few chances to get what you want. Inside the marsh there are 6 different areas, and each area has a daily Pokemon. Although you can get repeats of the same Pokemon, you can walk in each area and potentially find 6 different daily Pokemon. Although the binoculars in the building can tell you which is available, it's kinda hard to keep track of which locations you've already seen, so I just resorted to walking around in each area until I found the daily Pokemon, and then I decided if I wanted to catch it or not, and then just move on to the next area. I ended up only getting Gulpin during this, which is pretty bad considering nearly half of the encounters are only available here. I decided from this point that I wanted to go route by route and catch what I needed, which in theory is a great idea, but my luck was abysmal. I spent 40 minutes trying to catch one Chingling in 3 separate locations on the map, to the point that I genuinely thought it just was not in the game. After finally finding one, my chat suggested that I should take a break and try something a little bit more relaxing. I'm just kidding, we're doing Feebas now. So if you know nothing about Feebas, strap in because this one is an absolute treat. Inside Mount Coronet, there's a pond that contains a few different types of fish, but this is the exclusive location for Feebas. The catch, however, is that Feebas can only be in certain parts of the water. Doesn't sound too bad, right? So does this game tell you where they are? Absolutely not. Out of the 528 tiles you can fish on, only 4 of them contain Feebas, which means that you have to fish until you find one. While this is already a pain, Feebas' encounter rate is 50%, and although that is pretty high, this means that you could fish in the spot and find a Gyarados or Wishcash and not even know that you passed the tile that you needed. On the small upside, an immediate concern that a lot of people have is, oh, well what if you start at the top and they're all lined up next to each other at the bottom and you can waste an entire day fishing? And thankfully the game is coded to help you out just a little bit. Each Feebas tile is separated by 132 tiles, so realistically you should be able to find one in every quarter section of the pond. So with all this information in mind, it's very obvious that this is a tedious mess of fishing over and over and just praying that you happen to get lucky enough to find the fish on the correct tile, but there is one more caveat. Once the in-game clock switches over to the next day, the location of the Feebas tiles are randomized again. This means that if you hunt late enough at night and it hits 12 AM and you're halfway through, you could definitely continue fishing, but you've already missed out on like 2 to 3 tiles and probably about to research that entire area. Because I didn't intend on having a long stream for that day, although it was later in the day, I decided to roll the dice and see what I could find. Initially, it wasn't too bad trying to reel in every tile, but over the course of the stream, you could see that I was starting to lose it a little bit. Anyways, after fishing for an hour, I realized that the tiles are probably going to reset by the time I made it halfway through, so I just decided to call it quits for the day and then come back tomorrow in the morning and take it on. On day 4, I ripped through the honey trees to once again see everything except for a Heracross, and I made my way back to Mount Coronet to hunt the ugly fish. Because it's a 50% encounter rate, I decided to fish in each tile twice. Personally, I would recommend 3 times just to be sure, but because I wanted to complete this challenge as fast as possible, I trusted the coin flip wouldn't fail me twice in a row and made my way through the water. The efficiency of like IVs and breeding and competitive teams, there's gonna be a point. Oh, yeah! I'm a gamer! Wow, that wasn't that bad. That was pretty easy. That was pretty fast. All right, I'm catching you. I'm catching you! After about 2 hours, I finally found one of the tiles that contained Feebas, which honestly was pretty fast when the entire pond can take about 6 to 7 hours to get through. I made it about a quarter up the pond, so I believe I found either the first or second one, but thankfully this didn't take too long. Although this is pretty great, we still have to evolve the thing, which is a whole different endeavor. Unlike the newer gens where you can just trade it with a prism scale, the remakes make you do it the old way by maxing out its beauty stat. The process of doing this basically boils down to you whipping out poffins for 30 minutes, but there is a little bit of knowledge you need before you can hop in. In order to make poffins, you're going to need berries, and only a set list of them increase the beauty stat. Although you can buy some of the starter berries from the berry house in your heart home, the rarer the berry you use, the more the Pokemon's beauty stat increases. Because you can only feed your Pokemon a maximum of 11 poffins, and if you don't reach max beauty, you wasted both the berries and the Pokemon. Thankfully, raspberries are pretty common, and as long as you don't burn your poffins, you shouldn't have a problem. What did I do wrong? It's also important to catch a Feebas that has a nature that positively increases its special attack stat, as those Pokemon benefit the most from beauty stat poffins. Thankfully, you can fish at the Feebas tile for as long as you want, and you can get as many as you need until the end of the day. After showing off that my 100 hours spent watching Claire Saffitz make gourmet chocolate is finally paying off, I used all my beauty poffins to max out Feebas' beauty. After leveling it up, it evolved into Milotic, which puts my Pokedex at 70 Pokemon. I realized that I hadn't finished my daily events by this point in the stream, so I caught Makawita and made my way back to the Great Marsh, but this time I had a different strategy. I went underground and caught Bulbasaur, who happens to know the move Sweet Scent. If you use it in the overworld, it will guarantee an encounter, but if you use it again without leaving the area, it will skip the usage animation and immediately give you an encounter. Because it takes so long to get an encounter in the Great Marsh, this allows you to 1. Find out what's in each area faster, and 2. Not have to exit and re-enter the marsh if you run out of steps. Once again, I got kinda unlucky, but I did manage to get Carnivine, which leaves me with only 4 more to get. Although I said this about 6 different times in this video, with the hardest parts of the game out of the way, it's now time to really make a dent in the Pokedex. Because I really didn't do much the past few days in terms of catching Pokemon, I went down the list of Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex and tried to catch everything that I could. This video would easily be 20 minutes longer than it already is if I named everything that I caught, but essentially I bounced around the entire region just catching everything in the Sinnoh Dex order. This also included me going underground, as well as checking the honey trees again, and would you believe it if I still didn't find Heracross? When it came to the underground, I basically caught everything in sight, as well as I tried to evolve Pokemon that I couldn't catch to complete the Dex as much as I could. Over the course of 4 hours, I managed to bring the Sinnoh Dex to 116 Pokemon, which is nearly double what I started the day with. This also doesn't include all the Pokemon that were caught that added to the National Dex, but overall I was able to end the day with some genuine progress. For the following day, I really only had the goal of completing the Sinnoh Dex on my mind, and considering that there were a decent chunk that are exclusive to the opposite game, I was already pretty much there. The remaining encounters were mostly special evolutions or require breeding, so basically the whole Sinnoh Dex has been caught by this point. Because there are a ton of friendship evolutions in the game, I made sure to grab the Soothe Bell from the Pokemon Mansion to help expedite that process. For this day's Great Marsh, I found Execute and Shroomish, which basically leaves only 2 left before we never have to look at this pile of mud again. In the underground, I caught the remaining Pokemon that need to be evolved, like Female Combi, but I did also grab some non-Sinnoh Dex Pokemon along the way if I came across something rare. During these catches, I evolved the remaining Pokemon that evolved by normal level up, which left me with really only the weird evolutions that I decided to tackle all at once. Before we do that, I stopped in Salacian Town to breed some catches to get some Pokemon that are harder to get as wild encounters, like Mime Jr., as well as some like Riolu for the living Dex, so I didn't have to make as many stops here. Oh, it's here! My food! I'm gonna have a mango right now. I'm gonna hatch this Mime Jr., I'm gonna walk away and come back to it being shiny. It's gonna be shiny. All right, chat, I bought mango slices. They were pre-sliced mangoes, and they didn't have them in stock. So instead of not just getting me the mangoes, why did they send me 30 whole mangoes instead? What idiot in the like, that's so many mangoes, dude. That's so many. I feel like I'm a math problem. With all that taken care of, I made my way back to the post-game island to take care of grinding out the friendship evolutions. Now, when it comes to evolving one friendship Pokemon, you can do it pretty quickly with some daily events that increase your friendship, but when you have 5 you have to do, it's a little bit different. Realistically, the fastest way you can increase it is by giving them vitamins and just grinding levels, and eventually all of them should evolve. One big mistake I made is that I didn't catch any of them with the proper ball. If you catch them in a luxury ball, they'll gain happiness twice as fast, which looking back would have saved me probably an entire hour of grinding if I planned ahead a little bit. The only better ball is the friend ball, which basically allows the Pokemon to almost immediately evolve, but that item was only a pre-order bonus, and even when you redeem that code, you only get 2, so that only helps so much. As for trainer fights, this battle in particular isn't the highest yielding when it comes to XP, but since it's so close to the Pokemon Center, it's really easy to heal up your power points rather than the trek that you have to take for the Chansey trainer on the route above. After spending an hour and a half grinding, I managed to evolve all the friendship evolutions, including a Chansey that I caught in a friend ball, which then evolved in about 3 minutes. With that done, the Sinnoh Dex is now sitting at a total of 139 Pokemon, which is everything you can catch excluding trade evolutions and version exclusives from Diamond. Because I had already caught them in my Catch 'em All, I decided to trade them for my Diamond copy and then evolve and breed whatever I got, so I at least had to put in a little extra work from getting them from another game. Because I didn't really have any duplicate Pokemon, I spent some time in the forest trying to get a bunch of easy Pokemon for some quick trades. Wait. Yeah! How does he do it? How does he do I was like, wait a second. Wait just a darn minute.
Can you hurt yourself? I'm just gonna keep throwing balls. There's no way I don't catch you, right?
Too good. Too good at the game. After grabbing the shiny, I was able to trade with my copy of Diamond to receive all the trade evolutions and exclusives, and I got to breeding to complete more of the living decks. After hatching Murkrow, I had finally completed the entire Sinnoh Dex. Well, except for Heracross. But with that giant hurdle out of the way, I was ready to take on the National Dex. Because there are like 30 different side tasks you can do to complete the decks, I figured I'd start off easy with the Poke Radar and take care of the very limited list of exclusives. When you use the radar, you can chain the Pokemon available on the route, but there's a 12% chance that you can start the chain with an exclusive Pokemon that's not normally available in this area. Once again, a lot of these are in the Grand Underground, but Pokemon like Smeargle can only be found through this method, which makes them pretty easy to forget about. In total, there are only about 5 exclusives, so this took all of 10 minutes to get through. Now it's time for the fun part. As you'd expect, the Grand Underground is going to be the majority of the rest of the available encounters for this game, and my best advice I could possibly give to get them all quickly is to just literally catch everything in sight. My plan at the moment was going to each biome and running in and out of the area until I had one of every Pokemon I thought was there, and then planned on making my rounds back once I had run through every location. I started out grabbing everything in Fountain Spring Cave, Spacious Cave, Swampy Cave, Icy Cave, Whiteout Cave, and part of Dazzling Cave before eventually getting very tired from being live for about 11 hours at this point. In those 3 hours, I basically caught everything available in those areas and finished the day with a whopping 252 Pokemon in the National Dex and 212 in my Living Dex, which was a massive upgrade compared to the day before. The night before day 6, I took the liberty of actually organizing my entire PC, which will help not only give a better visual of what's going on, but it'll also let me find out what I need to evolve or breed a lot faster than having to search each and every Pokemon when I need them. Once again, the honey trees didn't yield a Heracross, but I realized after sorting that I just never grabbed some of the duplicates like Cherubi, so if I came across them, I made sure to get them. The swarm for today was Skitty, which happens to be a swarm exclusive, and at the Great Marsh I found Paris and Yanma, which only left Kangaskhan for this location. With all out of the way, I was more than prepared to head back to the underground. I made note of all the Pokemon that I missed in the locations I went to yesterday, so I spent time grabbing all of those, as well as evolving as many Pokemon as I could along the way. Because in the post-game all the Pokemon are around level 60, all the Pokemon take only 1 level to evolve and also give a pretty solid amount of experience depending on what you catch. I made my rounds catching the last few starters I didn't have, and originally I had the intention of catching 3 of each starter line in the underground, but because they're relatively rare, I figured that breeding them would be easier to both get more of them, as well as to evolve their mid-stage evolutions. After spending a lot of time doing that, I had to make a lot more progress finding mysterious shards for the rest of the Ramanas Park legendaries. To no surprise, I was able to collect quite a few pretty quickly, but I also managed to find a Sunstone, which is probably one of the rarest stones in Shining Pearl due to the fact that it's much more common in the other version, as well as that no wild Pokemon in this game hold it. In Brilliant Diamond, the Moonstone is the rare one, but you can grab them off Wild Clefairy in so many locations. At this point, I had been underground for about 4 hours, so I decided to take a quick break and grab some Pokemon that were only available in the main Sinnoh region. Heading back into Victory Road, I took on the side quest with Marley, which allowed me to fish up Lapras, and back in Hearthome City, I completely forgot to grab the gift EB from Bebe after beating the story. Although I do need to breed an absurd amount of these for the living decks, conveniently, the Trophy Garden encounter for the day was also Eevee, which was a big help since I was able to catch 2 of them in Luxury Balls to help with their respective friendship evolutions. The remainder of the day was almost entirely spent grinding out evolutions. Because at this point I had caught nearly every Pokemon line in one way or another, this was a massive list of Pokemon to grind. This includes things like stone evolutions, but thankfully during all the mining for shards I managed to get like 20 of every basic evolution stone, so I was fully prepared. On my spreadsheet I made note of every Pokemon that I caught multiple of, so I just went down the line adding Pokemon to my party, evolving it, and then replacing it with whoever was next in line. I decided this time around to fight the Chansey trainer on Route 228 to gain more XP, and because you earn about 2,000 to 3,000 more experience per battle, this process was a lot smoother. After about 2 hours of grinding, I basically evolved everything in my PC, and conveniently all the honey trees were ready to go by this point, so I tested my luck again. I won't win this one. This is a losing battle, chat. I don't know what I did wrong the first time, that's fine. How do I find Munchlax before I find what I need? So if you don't know, out of the 21 trees available in this game, Munchlax only appears in 4 of them, and additionally, it's a 1% encounter, which makes it easily the rarest Pokemon in the entire game, considering the game doesn't tell you which trees contain Munchlax. Obviously, you can get it in the Grand Underground now, but the fact that I somehow managed to find this before a single Heracross is so unlucky. But this set of trees got even more insane. Yes! I was losing hope, chat. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was losing hope. And let it be known, I think... Wait, chat. I found every single Pokemon. Like, I found every single Pokemon in one go on the honey trees. Because I found Worm, Burmy, Apom, Cherubi, Munchlax, and Heracross. Am I missing anything? So with Heracross finally in my hands, I completed the Sinnoh Dex. Although this was probably a good high note to end the stream, I still had a few more things I wanted to do. With the shards collected underground, I was able to get a few more legendaries. Latios, Latias, and Moltres, and I realized at this point that I was insanely close to catching 100 Pokemon for the day, so I scrambled around the map trying to catch literally anything I forgot to grab. I ended up getting a few Pokemon around the survival area and Route 230, and after running out of Pokemon to find, I realized that there was another event that I didn't take care of. Because it was nighttime, I was able to enter the old chateau and catch Rotom, which left me with only one more event in the entire game. But with that, I was done for the day. With that done, I have 350 out of 368 seen, but also 493 in the dex, which means I have 143 Pokemon that I have not caught. As for living dex, I have, drumroll, 325. So I'm missing 25 Pokemon that I've just seen in battle. We started today at 212. So I almost caught 150 Pokemon today. On day 7, I started out with my daily events, which at this point was reduced by a lot, considering that I really only had to worry about swarms and Trophy Garden Pokemon. For the swarm, I got Electrike, which happened to be a new one, and Porygon in the Trophy Garden, which was arguably the largest one out of the entire area. From this point, there are really only a few tasks left to complete this game. Breeding, catching a few more Pokemon, and mining to get the rest of the mysterious shards. To make breeding a little bit easier to collect eggs, I traded with a viewer for a foreign Ditto, as well as fought Morimoto at the Valor Lakefront to get the Oval Charm. With this combination, I was getting an egg basically every time I rode past the breeding house, which saves an absurd amount of time in comparison to using 2 Pokemon with the same trainer ID. The breeding section basically just boiled down to what I mentioned earlier, as I needed a bunch of duplicates for the living decks like the starters, and I ended up hatching over 60 different eggs in the span of 2 hours, which is pretty decent considering I was constantly swapping Pokemon in and out of the daycare. During my journey down the spreadsheet, I made note of all the Pokemon I didn't catch, and fortunately enough, it was a relatively small list. Almost all of them were just super odd encounters like Relicanth, but a few rare encounters in the underground took up a solid chunk of time. It took me nearly 30 minutes just to find a single Grimer for some reason, and thankfully I needed to be in the area anyways to mine for some more items. During the grind, I managed to find an old Amber, but at this point I'd mined nearly 30 fossils and still had not found one claw fossil. This ended up being harder to find than Heracross, and you could definitely tell that I was getting a little impatient. How did this die? It died. This is a brand new... It died while...
Look. Look. Look, not my hand. No. Okay, whatever. There's ink in it. There's ink. Breath on the tip. It worked. Why did that work? I don't get it. What just happened? What? I didn't touch it. I didn't touch. What is it? What just happened? I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid to check the game. I didn't even touch that. You saw I was holding my pen. I didn't have my controller in my hand. It just broke.
After that, I took it as a sign that I should probably do something else, so I took all my shards back to Ramanas Park to finish off the legendaries. I was able to grab Articuno, Zapdos, and Lugia from the park, and although I did have the shards to finish the rest, it was another really long stream, so I decided to save it for the next day. By the end of the day, I brought the total up to 380 Pokemon, which may not seem like a big increase, but a majority of the day was spent getting duplicates, so I still did get a lot done. Before the next day, I spent some time off stream catching the night Pokemon like Misdreavus, as well as taking care of evolving Eevee to Umbreon so I didn't have to stream until that point in the day. The swarm for this day ended up being Nosepass, which was once again exclusive of this mechanic, and that was basically it for the daily events, which only left me with spending the day in the Grand Underground. After mining this challenge for easily 6 to 7 hours by this point, I still had yet to find a single claw fossil. This is one of those situations where it isn't even a rare fossil to find based on your version, I was just having absolutely terrible luck. To make it even worse, I kept finding root fossils which are the same color as the claw fossil, so it just felt like the game was toying with me every 20 minutes, praying that I was going to snap.
I thought that was the fossil. I thought it was it, but it wasn't. Tricked you. Haha. See ya. Chat, I'm starting to think that my Elgato is broken.
After mining for nearly 2.5 hours, I finally found one, only to find another one only 5 minutes later. Just to quickly put in perspective how long this took me, I collected 30 small mysterious shards and 8 large ones by the time I found one, but thankfully we can at least make some use of them now. Back in Ramanas Park, I purchased the remaining shards for the game, and I was able to catch Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, and Mewtwo. Now it's time for the final grind. Because I had spent so much time breeding everything the day before, I had to take care of evolving all of those to really help improve the living dex. Thankfully, a majority of these are really low, one-battle to evolution Pokemon like Bayleaf and Ninjask, so I was able to knock out a ton of the new dex entries in only an hour.
Okay, gotta go up here, chat. I need Gengar, so we're gonna go get Gengar up here. So I was told that there's a trade you can do to get Gengar. I think it's in this house, right? Trade your Medicham for Haunter. Yeah, we get it so easy. So just trade this Medicham, and we should get a Haunter, and then the Haunter, because if you didn't know, Haunter by trade evolves into Gengar, so we're gonna get a Gengar. See? There it is. Cool. All right, so we got Haunter. Easy. We're done. Don't have to worry about it. No need to trade when I can just get it right now. There it is. There it is. Add it to the dex. Fantastic. Did my Haunter turn this on? Wait. Wait, why didn't it evolve? You what? What are you? No. No. No, this is so embarrassing.
After running through the spreadsheet again, I realized I was still missing a few more breeding exclusives like Poochyena and Tailo, and after doing that, I was basically done with the whole Pokedex. At this point, I realized I had completely forgotten to do the final roamer for the game, so I made my way back to Candelave City to start the Cresselia event. Now, because I didn't have another Master Ball to take this on, I just tried to get a little crafty and use Wobbuffet instead to lock it in with Shadow Tag. Although this did work pretty well, I found that if you save in the area where it's supposed to appear, unlike the original games, the roaming Pokemon won't switch to a random route. This way, I was able to start the battle, throw a quick ball, and reset if I don't catch it. This avoids having to deal damage with Wobbuffet and worrying about Cresselia using Moonlight, and it only took about 10 minutes to finally get the final Pokemon. But as you can probably guess, we're not really done with the game, are we? Now, when it comes to Pearl, aside from swarms and trophy Garden Pokemon, I had a complete living dex of everything in the game at this point, which means that I was free to boot up my copy of Diamond and grab the remaining version exclusives. Because I'd already had a few in my other copy, it didn't take too long to get them, and a majority of them were available in the Grand Underground, so it only took about half an hour to get everything that I needed. After trading them to Pearl, I spent the remainder of the stream trading, breeding, and then evolving everything in the game, which left me with probably the most progress I had made in an entire day. For the National Dex, I had a total of 454 Pokemon, and for the Living Dex, I had 453 because I forgot to evolve Pupitar, but I knew the next day was going to be the end of the challenge. On the night before the next stream, I knew that I had to gather more mysterious shards for Diamond's exclusives in Ramanas Park, so I spent about an hour grabbing what I needed, so I was fully prepared to complete the challenge when I went live. On day 9, I immediately made my way to Ramanas Park and quickly caught Raikou, Entei, Suicune, and Ho-Oh to finish off every legendary in the game, which left me with only a little more grinding. After looking through the spreadsheet, I forgot to get Cubone and Larvitar to their final evolutions, but after doing that, I was basically done with the entire National Dex as well as my Living Dex. But there's a glaring issue in this challenge that I wanted to go over: the daily events. By this point in the challenge, I had checked the daily swarms, trophy garden, honey trees, and the Great Marsh every possible chance that I could, and I was still not able to get all of them. Because there are 28 different swarm Pokemon that can repeat at random, it's nearly impossible to get everything you need in only 9 days. Although I did have the intention of getting everything in one game, I felt it would have been dumb to not release this video until I got lucky enough to find the last 5 swarms that I needed, as that could take an entire month, so I just traded the last few with my viewers. I like to note that since the day I completed this challenge, I still have not got a single new swarm, and I've already repeated some like Makuhita, so personally I think this was a good choice. Now let's talk about the trophy garden. So during the breeding and evolving for the swarm Pokemon, I asked my chat if anyone was willing to trade the final Trophy Garden Pokemon I needed, which were Plusle, Minun, and Castform. For some reason, out of the near 1,000 people watching my stream at that moment, not a single person had one of those 3. After going down the list of what I encountered, multiple people started saying they encountered the same list of Pokemon, which was the moment where we found out that the Trophy Garden is a set list. So when you unlock the National Dex in this game, the Trophy Garden will enable for the daily Pokemon. However, unlike every other aspect of this game, the Pokemon you get from the list is in a sequential Pokedex order. This means that although I thought I was getting lucky getting stuff like Meowth and Porygon, it was planned from the beginning. Because at the moment I was on day 9, I had to wait until days 11, 12, and 13 to get the last 3 that I needed, which means that if you wanted to complete this Pokedex as fast as possible without trading, it would take you almost 2 entire weeks, regardless of how fast you could catch everything else. Despite that, I still managed to get them, but I figured I'd clarify that in case some people were wondering how I got them. From here, I spent a little time grabbing the final trade evolution items, and after trading everything between my other copy, I had successfully completed the National Dex, as well as the Living Dex for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But how'd I do? Okay, so, looking at the whole dex, I have made an entire Living Dex of every Pokemon in the game. I'll note off the ones I do not have. Ditto. Ditto is in jail, in daycare jail. I do have a Ditto. I have Mew in my party right now. Right? Full. Celebi's not in the game. There. I'm missing Plusle and Minun. Plusle and Minun are right here, because those are Trophy Garden Pokemon, and we have found out that Trophy Garden Pokemon are in a sequential order. Unlike every other aspect of the game for like daily Pokemon, for some reason these are in sequential order, so in 3 days, I should be able to get Plusle. So I have Castform right here. Deoxys not in the game, but aside from that, I have every Pokemon, and also Darkrai, Shaman, Arceus are not obtained legitimately, so they're not in the game yet, in my eyes. In total, this challenge took me 96 hours and 58 minutes, but I also left my Switch on overnight for, like, I think day 2 or 3, so the actual time is around 88 hours or something, but regardless, a very long time for a little over a week of playing. Overall, this challenge was super fun to take on, and if you're interested in trying this out for yourself, I made a checklist guide in the description that contains as much information as I could put into it. I want to give a big shout out to the people who helped me trade for the Swarm Pokemon, as the video wouldn't have been completed without it, as well as the viewers who watched nearly all 9 streams to completion. It really means a lot. As always, if you liked the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. As I mentioned in the last video, I'm streaming nearly every day on my Twitch channel when I'm working on challenges, so if you're interested in watching me take on the challenges live, you can catch me taking on the next video and see what I'm planning on doing next for the channel. Other than that, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.